Hi everyone, thanks for joining me again today for chapter 27 of 2nd Chronicles. This is a long book. Luckily though, not all the chapters are super long. It's not like the book of Luke where every chapter is like 50 verses, 60 verses. The chapters are somewhat short, and that is especially true for this chapter. It might be the shortest at only 9 verses. We're going to talk about the reign of Jotham in Judah. And just so you know, if you haven't done chapter 26, the application for today is going to tie back in a little bit to chapter 26, so you may want to do that one first. There is a PDF on our website, as there is every day. We make one for each study and give them away for free. So there's a link down in the description where you can find it on the website. And there's a number of other things on the website that you can check out. But let's talk about our timeline. Where do these events fit in the history of the world? Well, they fall somewhere between 760 to 740 BC. That's the window in which Jotham's 16-year reign over Judah probably fits. Two key characters or groups of people that we'll discuss here. First of all, we have Jotham. He is Uzziah's son. Uzziah was the king before him. He died. Jotham takes the throne of Judah, the southern kingdom. Then we have the Ammonites. Now, these are not Israelites. They're not people from Judah. They're another race of people. The Ammonites fought with Jotham's army, and they ultimately lost and became his subjects. We'll talk about them paying tribute to Jotham in chapter 27. And then two key locations to point out. First of all, we have Jerusalem, the capital of Judah, and that's where Jotham's throne, palace, house would have been. Then we're also going to talk about the hill country of Judah, where Jotham undertakes some building projects. This is a strip of elevated land that runs kind of parallel to the coast of the Dead Sea. Generally speaking, the hill country of Judah runs south of Jerusalem down below Hebron, and I've kind of outlined the general area you'll see highlighted up on the screen. Being that we only have 9 verses in this chapter, I've only got one section. Verses 1 through 9, Jotham reigns in Judah. Pretty simple. Jotham was 25 years old when he started reigning over Judah, and he reigned for 16 years. His father was King Uzziah. You remember what happened to King Uzziah in the last chapter? God cursed him with leprosy because he entered the temple when he wasn't supposed to. Only the priests were allowed to do that. Interestingly, though, the text says, Jotham, quote, did what was right in the eyes of the Lord according to all that his father Uzziah had done, except he did not enter into the temple of the Lord. So Jotham did what was right, and he avoided the mistake that his father made of going back into the temple. But interestingly, it says that Uzziah did what was right in the eyes of the Lord as well. And so we'll talk about that in our application section. So Jotham is a good king, a righteous king. He's trying to do what's right. We're told that he undertook a number of building projects in Jerusalem, including some of the walls and the upper gate of the temple. He built cities in the hill country of Judah. He also went to battle with the Ammonites, who lived on the right side or the east side of the Jordan River. And God gave him victory over the Ammonites. He subjected them, and they had to pay him quite a hefty tribute or tax every year. They paid him 100 talents of silver, 10,000 cores of wheat, and 10,000 cores of barley each year. And the approximates, just so you know, a talent is about 75 pounds or 34 kilograms, and a core is approximately 220 liters. So multiply 10,000 by 220, and that will give you an idea of how many liters the Ammonites were paying to Judah on a yearly basis. Jotham became very strong and, quote, ordered his ways before the Lord his God. After 16 years, he died and he was buried in Jerusalem, and his son Ahaz then takes the throne of Judah. We'll move on to his story in the upcoming chapters. So, a good king over Judah, and there's not even any asterisks, not anything mentioned here that mistakes that he made. But let's talk about mistakes a little bit in our application section. Did you notice, hopefully you did because I already pointed it out, did you notice how the Bible writer describes King Uzziah as a man who, quote, did what was right in the eyes of the Lord, even though the last half of chapter 26 is dedicated to talking about his sin, his pride, and how God punished him for it? Well, imagine if your entire life, and that would include all of your mistakes, were written down in a book for people to read forever. Do you think that there would be perhaps a few sections that you might be embarrassed for people to read? I find stories like Isaiah's and what God says about him to be very encouraging, not because we should excuse him in his sin, but because it shows us God's grace. He made a big mistake, as we found out in chapter 26. He let his pride get the better of him, and yet God still chose to summarize his life not by his sins and by his mistakes, but by his efforts to do what was right. And I think that's wonderful because it shows us that God doesn't always look at us with a critical eye as if we are just defined by our mistakes, but rather he looks at us in a gracious way, and certainly a more gracious way than we could ever deserve.